The city was a kingdom of glass and steel, and he was its king. Or at least that's what the magazine said. He lived in a world of breathtaking numbers and silent, empty rooms at the very top of a skyscraper. His name was synonymous with success, but if you asked him what true happiness felt like, he would have had no answer. He had traded his feelings for a fortune a long time ago. His story didn't start in a penthouse, though. It started in a cramped, messy apartment years ago, filled with the sounds of dreams and laughter. He and his wife were a team. They were young, wildly in love, and building a small tech company from the ground up. They dreamed of a future where they would be a family. Then his wife became pregnant. It was the happiest news of their lives. But the sky of their happiness soon grew dark with clouds. Their small company, their first baby, began to struggle. A big competitor crushed them. Investors pulled out. The pressure was immense, a heavy weight on his shoulders. He felt like he was failing, drowning in debt and fear. He started to pull away, to close himself off. The man who used to laugh easily became quiet and grim. Then the storm hit. His wife went into labor. It was a long and difficult birth. In the hospital, after hours of waiting, a doctor came out with a tired face. He said they had a beautiful, healthy baby girl. But his wife, the love of his life, had suffered a sudden, unexpected complication. She was gone. Just like that. The world didn't just stop. It shattered into a million sharp pieces. He held his newborn daughter in his arms, and instead of feeling love, he felt a terror so deep it froze his heart. He looked at her tiny, perfect face and saw only his own failure. He had failed to save his business. He had failed to save his wife. How could he possibly care for this fragile little life? He was broken, and he believed a broken man could only break things further. A voice, cold and sharp from the pain, whispered in his mind. It told him this child deserved more. She deserved a stable home, a loving family, a chance he was sure he could never give her. He was so deep in his own grief and fear that this voice sounded like reason. So he made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He signed a piece of paper giving her up. He walked out of that hospital alone, leaving his daughter behind. He told himself it was for her own good, that he was setting her free from a father who had nothing to offer but ruin. It was the biggest lie he ever told, and he told it to himself. He buried that day, that memory, that little girl in the deepest part of his soul. He used work like a shovel, digging a hole so deep he thought he would never have to face what he had done. He worked day and night. He built his company back, bigger and stronger than before. He became a titan of industry. He built an empire called Vance Innovations. The man who felt like nothing was now worth billions, but the empire was built on a foundation of silence. His home was not a home. It was a beautifully decorated shell. He had everything you could buy and nothing that truly mattered. The ghost of his wife and the ghost of his daughter lived in the quiet spaces between his meetings. One evening, he was looking over plans for his newest project. It wasn't a new phone or a new app. It was a charitable foundation for underprivileged children. His public relations team had suggested it. It's good for the brand, they said. It shows you have a heart. The irony was a bitter taste in his mouth. He agreed to it, not out of kindness, but because it was the next logical step for his public image. He saw it as another business transaction. The launch was to be a massive gala event, a night of glittering lights, expensive dresses, and powerful people. It was a performance, and he was the star. He stood in front of a mirror, adjusting his tie. He practiced the smile he would use all night, the one that was confident, charming, and completely empty. He was about to present himself to the world as a generous philanthropist, a man who cared deeply for children. He pushed down the small, screaming voice inside him that called him a hypocrite. Tonight, he would play the part of a good man, all while ignoring the one child he had left behind. The night was just beginning, and he had no idea that his past was waiting for him in the crowd, ready to bring his entire world crashing down. The grand ballroom was a sea of soft light and the low, happy murmur of voices. It was a world of perfect, shiny things. The air itself smelled expensive, a mix of perfume and flowers. He moved through the crowd like a ship sailing on calm water. To everyone watching, he was the picture of success. He wore a sharp, dark suit and a smile that was practiced and easy. He shook hands with important people, listened to their stories, and nodded in all the right places. His mind, however, was somewhere else. It was calculating, always calculating. He was thinking about the next deal, the next project, the next headline. This charity event was just another box to tick. He saw the children from the orphanage who were brought in for the evening, their faces clean and their best clothes on. He saw them as part of the scenery, a necessary prop for the story they were all telling. He felt a distant pity for them, a feeling that was quick to come and quick to go, like a cloud passing in front of the sun. He stepped onto the small stage. The lights felt hot on his skin. He looked out at the crowd, all those faces looking back at him, waiting for his words. He began his speech. His voice was strong and clear, flowing through the microphone. He talked about opportunity. He talked about hope. He talked about giving every child a chance to shine. The words were good words, powerful words.
He had paid a writer a lot of money to craft them.
But as he spoke them, they felt hollow in his mouth, like eating food with no taste. He was telling a room full of people how to care for children, while the memory of his own child was locked away in a dark corner of his heart. He finished his speech to a wave of warm applause. He smiled that public smile again and stepped down, melting back into the crowd. People patted him on the back, congratulating him on his vision, his generosity. He accepted it all with a nod, the emptiness inside him growing a little bigger. He decided to walk through the room to mingle. That's when his eyes, for no reason he could understand, were drawn to a quiet corner. Most of the children from the home were staying together, looking a little overwhelmed by all the noise and glitter. But one little girl was sitting slightly apart on a large chair, her small legs dangling, not quite reaching the floor. She couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 years old. She had a quietness about her that was different from the other children. She wasn't fidgeting or looking around nervously. She was just sitting, observing everything with a calm, serious look in her eyes. She was holding the hand of a woman who was clearly a caregiver from the home, and then, as if she felt him staring, the little girl turned her head. Their eyes met. It was like a lightning strike in the middle of that calm, perfect room. The air rushed out of his lungs. The noise of the party, the music, the chatter, it all faded into a dull, distant hum. The whole world seemed to shrink down to a single point, that little girl's face. It was her eyes. They were a shade of sea green, a color he had not seen in 6 long years. A color that belonged to only one person in his life. His wife. His late wife had those exact same eyes that could be full of laughter one moment and deep and thoughtful the next. He felt a physical jolt, a painful twist in his chest. It was like seeing a ghost. He stood there, frozen, a man who commanded boardrooms without breaking a sweat, now completely paralyzed by a child's gaze. His heart was beating a wild, frantic rhythm against his ribs. It couldn't be. It was just a coincidence, a trick of the light. His mind was playing games with him, stirred up by all the talk of children and charity. But he couldn't look away. He found his feet moving, carrying him across the room toward her as if pulled by an invisible string. He didn't think. He just moved. The crowd seemed apart for him. He reached her corner of the room. The caregiver, a kind-looking woman, looked up at him with a respectful smile. "Good evening, sir," she said. "This is a wonderful event," he barely heard her. His attention was fixed on the little girl. He slowly knelt down, bringing himself to her eye level. The expensive fabric of his trousers pressed against the floor, but he didn't care. The world had disappeared. Close up, the resemblance was even more startling. It wasn't just the eyes. It was the shape of her face, the little curve of her smile. It was like looking at a tiny living piece of his past. His voice, when he finally found it, was soft and a little shaky. "Hello there," he said. The little girl looked at him, not with fear or shyness, but with a simple, open curiosity. "Hello," she replied, her voice clear and small. He had to know. He had to hear it. He gestured gently toward the caregiver. "And what is your name?" he asked the girl, his heart hammering so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. The caregiver answered for her, beaming with pride. "This is one of our brightest, sir. Her name is Lily." Lily, the name echoed in his mind. It was a beautiful name. It was also the name his wife had loved. The name she had chosen for their baby if it was a girl. He remembered that conversation in their little apartment, her face glowing with happiness. They had decided on the name Lily. A cold dread, mixed with a wild, impossible hope, washed over him. This was no coincidence. This was his daughter. The daughter he had held only once. The daughter he had walked away from. He looked into her sea-green eyes, and for the first time in 6 years he could not hide from what he had done. The polished tycoon, The king of his glass kingdom was brought to his knees not by a business rival, but by the quiet gaze of the little girl he had left behind. The foundation of the life he had built, a foundation made of money and lies, cracked open right there on the ballroom floor. The rest of the gala was a blur. The lights, the music, the faces, they all melted together into a meaningless noise. He moved through the crowd like a robot, his body performing the actions while his mind was somewhere else entirely. He smiled, he nodded, he shook hands, but inside he was falling. The only thing that felt real was the memory of those sea-green eyes. He left the event early, giving a vague excuse about a sudden headache. It wasn't a lie. His head was pounding, and his heart felt like it was being squeezed in a cold fist. The drive home in the back of his quiet, expensive car was silent. He stared out the window at the city lights, but he didn't see them. All he could see was her face. He walked into his penthouse, the click of the door echoing in the vast empty space. For the first time, the silence felt accusing. He went to his desk, a large, sleek piece of furniture made of polished wood. He opened a drawer that he hadn't touched in years. At the very back, underneath old files, was a single, faded photograph. It was a picture of his wife taken a few months before she passed away. She was laughing, her head thrown back, her hand resting on her growing belly. Her eyes, those beautiful sea-green eyes, were sparkling with life and joy. He traced the shape of her face with his finger, a pain so sharp and fresh shooting through him that it took his breath away. He had locked this picture away because the hurt was too much to bear. Now, looking at it, he saw the same light in the little girl's eyes. His little girl. A storm of emotions raged inside him. There was a shocking, fierce joy. She is alive. She is healthy. She is beautiful. But that joy was immediately crushed by a wave of shame so deep it made him feel sick. He had abandoned her. He had signed a paper and walked away, believing his own lie that he was doing the right thing. He thought of her growing up in a children's home, while he lived in this palace of glass and steel. He had built an empire and she had no one. The next morning, he didn't go to the office. He called his most trusted assistant, a woman who had been with him for a long time and knew how to be discreet. He gave her a single, urgent task. Find out everything you can about a little girl named Lily from the Sunnyside home. I need to know her story. Everything. Waiting for the information was agony. He paced his apartment, his mind racing. He thought about showing up at the home and demanding to see her, but a new feeling stopped him. Fear. Not fear for his reputation, but a pure, simple fear. What if she was afraid of him? What if she hated him? What right did he have to burst into her life after all this time? The report came a day later. It was a thin file, but it felt heavy as a stone in his hands. He sat down and opened it. There were basic details about her life at the home, notes about her being a quiet and bright child. But it was the information about her past that made his blood run cold. The file confirmed that his wife had not died in childbirth. The words on the page were simple, but they shattered the story he had told himself for 6 years. His wife had survived. She had taken their baby girl home. She had named her Lily, just as they had planned. But the report stated that his wife had been in poor health, weakened by a broken heart and the strain of being a new mother all alone. She had struggled for a year, doing her best to care for their daughter before her body and spirit could not fight anymore. She had passed away quietly in her sleep. He dropped the file on the desk as if it had burned him. The room spun around him. The lie he had clung to, that he was a tragic widower who made a hard choice, crumbled to dust. The truth was far more ugly. He hadn't just walked away from a baby. He had walked away from his wife when she needed him most. His abandonment had added a weight to her life that she couldn't carry. He was not just absent. He was a cause of her suffering. He needed to know more. The file mentioned a maternal aunt who had taken Lily in for a short while after his wife's passing, but had been unable to keep her due to her own difficult circumstances. He had his assistant find the aunt's address. He found himself driving to a modest neighborhood a world away from his own. He parked his car and walked up to a small, well-kept house. He knocked on the door. A woman answered. She looked tired and her eyes held a deep sadness, but when she looked at him, her face changed. The sadness was replaced by a flash of recognition and then by a cold, hard anger. "You," she said, her voice low and sharp. "I wondered if I would ever see your face." He had no words. He just stood there, a billionaire in his fine clothes, feeling smaller than he ever had in his life. She didn't invite him in, but she didn't slam the door either. She stepped outside onto the porch, crossing her arms over her chest. "She waited for you, you know," the aunt said, her voice trembling with anger and grief. "Every day she would look out the window. She told everyone that you were a good man, that you were just lost, that you would come back to us. She made up stories about you for Lily. She protected your memory until her very last breath." She went back inside for a moment and returned with a small wooden box. She handed it to him. "These are for you," she said. "She wrote them for Lily to read when she was older. But you should read them first. You should know what you threw away." He took the box back to his car. His hands were shaking. He sat in the driver's seat and opened it. Inside were a stack of letters, written in his wife's familiar handwriting. He opened the first one. "My dearest Lily," it began, "if you are reading this, you are growing into a wonderful young woman. I want to tell you about your father. He was not a perfect man, but he had a good heart. He was brave and he dreamed big dreams. He loved us very much. Life can be complicated and confusing, my darling, and sometimes even good people get lost. But never ever think that he didn't love you. I know in my soul that he would have moved mountains for you if he could. Wherever he is, I know he loves you still." He couldn't read anymore. The words swam in front of his eyes. He put his head on the steering wheel and finally, for the first time since he was a boy, he cried. He cried for the wife he failed.
He cried for the daughter he never knew.
He cried for the man he could have been. The truth was not just a fact. It was a weight, and it was crushing him. He had come looking for his daughter, but he had found a ghost, and the ghost had offered him a forgiveness he knew he did not deserve. For a long time after that day on the porch, he felt like he was walking through thick fog. The letters from his wife were both a comfort and a punishment. He read them over and over until the paper started to feel soft at the edges. Her words painted a picture of a man he didn't recognize. A good man, a loving man, a man who was just lost. He didn't feel lost. He felt like he had made a conscious, terrible choice, and her kindness felt like a judgment he couldn't escape. He knew he had to see the little girl again. Lily. But this time it couldn't be as a rich man at a party. He couldn't just show up and turn her world upside down. The fear was still there, a cold knot in his stomach. What if he ruined her life all over again? He called the woman from the children's home, the kind-faced caregiver he had met at the gala. He asked if he could visit, not as a donor, but as a volunteer. He said he wanted to read to the children, maybe help out. The woman was surprised but happy to agree. She didn't know who he really was to Lily, and he didn't tell her. The first day he went to the home, his hands were sweating. He felt more nervous than he had on the day he took his company public. He walked into the common room, a bright space filled with toys and the sound of children playing. And there she was, sitting at a small table, carefully coloring a picture of a star. He didn't approach her directly. He sat with a group of other children and read them a story about a friendly dragon. He used different voices, making the children laugh. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Lily look up from her coloring, a small, curious smile on her face. When the story was over, she went back to her work. He came back the next week and the week after that. He became a regular visitor. He would help with puzzles, kick a ball around in the small yard, and always read stories. He and Lily started to talk in small, careful pieces. He learned that her favorite color was blue, like the sky in the morning. He learned that she loved strawberries but didn't like the little green leaves on top. He learned that she was quiet, but when she spoke, her words were thoughtful and precise. He found himself hanging on every one of them. One afternoon, they were sitting together on a bench in the yard. She was drawing with a set of colored pencils he had brought for all the children. He was watching her, his heart feeling too big for his chest. She was drawing a picture of a house with a big smiling sun above it. Next to the house, she drew 2 tall figures and one small one in the middle, holding their hands. He pointed to the drawing. "That's a nice family," he said, his voice gentle. She nodded, not looking up from her work. "It's my mommy," she said, "and my daddy, and me." His breath caught in his throat. He didn't know what to say. Did she remember him from the gala? Did she somehow feel the connection? Or was this just a wish, a dream she was putting on paper? She kept coloring, filling in the sun with a bright yellow. "My mommy is an angel," she stated, as simply as if she were saying the sky is blue. "She lives in the sky now, but she told me all about my daddy in her letters." He felt the world slow down. The sounds of the other children playing faded away. She did? He managed to say. Yes, Lily said, finally looking up at him. Her sea-green eyes were clear and calm. She said he was very smart, and that he built big tall buildings, and that he loved me more than anything in the whole world. He looked into her eyes and he saw no anger, no fear, no confusion. He saw only a quiet, steady belief. His wife's stories had built a fortress of love around this little girl, protecting her from the harsh truth. Lily put down her yellow pencil and picked up a blue one. She looked directly at him, her head tilted slightly. I know who you are, she said. Time stopped. This was the moment he had been dreading and hoping for. He prepared himself for the question, for the tears, for the rejection. He would have to explain, to apologize, to beg for a forgiveness he wasn't sure he deserved. He swallowed hard, his mouth dry. You do? She nodded, a small, sure movement. You're my dad. The words hung in the air between them, simple and earth-shattering. He couldn't speak. He could only look at her, waiting for what would come next. He braced himself for the storm. But the storm didn't come. Instead, Lily reached out and put her small hand on top of his much larger one. Her touch was warm and soft. It's okay, she said, her voice a gentle whisper. Mommy said you were lost, but she told me you would find your way back to us one day, and now you're here. He stared at her, completely stunned. There was no accusation in her voice. There was no demand. There was only a profound, simple acceptance. She had been waiting for him. All this time, she had known a version of him built from her mother's love, and she had believed without a doubt that he would return. The truth he had been carrying, the guilt, the shame, the weight of his failure, didn't disappear. But in that moment it was met by something so much stronger. It was met by a child's unconditional love, a love that had been kept safe for him by his wife all these years. He looked down at her small hand on his, and then back up at her face. He saw his wife's eyes looking back at him, filled with a trust he had done nothing to earn. He didn't see a business deal. He didn't see a problem to be solved. For the first time, he simply saw his daughter, and in that quiet moment in the sunny yard, the lost tycoon, surrounded by the ghosts of his past and the stunning grace of his future, finally began to find his way home. He sat on that bench for a long time, just holding his daughter's small hand in his. He didn't know what to say. Thank you didn't feel big enough. I'm sorry felt too small. So for a while he just sat in silence, feeling the warmth of her hand, listening to the sound of her breathing. It was the most real and peaceful moment he had experienced in years. Finally, he took a deep, slow breath. He knew he had to speak. He had to be honest with her in a way she could understand. Lily, he began, his voice a little rough with emotion. What your mommy wrote? That was very kind. She was the most kind person I have ever known. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But the truth is, I did get lost. I got very, very lost. And I am so sorry that it took me so long to find my way back to you. He looked into her eyes, expecting to see confusion. But she just listened, her expression serious and patient. I made a big mistake, he continued. I thought I couldn't be a good dad for you. But I was wrong. Being your dad is the most important thing I will ever do. And I promise you, from this day forward, I will be here. I am not going to be lost anymore. Lily thought about this for a moment, her small forehead wrinkling. Then she squeezed his hand. It's okay, Daddy, she said. You're here now. Those simple words lifted a weight from his shoulders that he had been carrying for 6 long years. He felt like he could finally breathe properly. The first thing he did was to go and see the aunt. He didn't go to her house with lawyers or papers. He went alone. He stood on her porch again, but this time he was a different man. He wasn't a proud tycoon. He was a humbled father. He told her everything. He told her about meeting Lily, about their conversations in the yard, and about the stunning moment she recognized him. The aunt listened, her arms crossed, her face guarded. I don't deserve a second chance, he said to her, his voice low and sincere. I know that. But I am begging you for one. Not for me, but for her. I want to be her father. I want to give her a home, a real home with me. But I cannot do this without your help. You are her family. You loved her mother. I need you to help me learn how to be the father she needs. The aunt looked at him for a long, long time. She saw the tears in his eyes. She saw the shame and the new fragile hope on his face. The anger in her own eyes slowly softened into a weary acceptance. She looked so much like her mother. the aunt said softly, her own eyes growing wet. She deserves to have a family. She nodded slowly. We will do this together. For her. And so a new chapter began, not with a bang, but with careful, quiet steps. He didn't rush. He didn't sweep Lily away from the only home she had known. He spent more and more time with her at the children's home. Then, with the aunt's blessing and support, he started taking Lily on small outings. They went to the park. They went for ice cream. They visited the library. He was learning the simple, beautiful rhythm of being a parent. He also made big changes in his own life. He called a meeting with the board of his company. He told them he was stepping down from his role as the leader. The news sent shockwaves through the business world. People couldn't understand it. He was at the peak of his power. But he understood. He had spent his life building a kingdom of money, and he had almost missed the chance to build a family. He took a much smaller role in the company, one that didn't require all of his time and all of his soul. His work was no longer his life. It was just a job, a way to provide for his daughter. The day finally came when Lily came to live with him in the big, quiet penthouse. It wasn't quiet for long. Soon the halls were filled with the sounds of her laughter. Drawings were taped to the walls of his sleek office. Colorful toys appeared on the expensive white rugs. The empty shell of a house was becoming a home, filled with light and life. One evening, after reading her a bedtime story, he was tucking her into her new bed. Her room was painted a soft blue like the morning sky. She looked up at him, her eyes sleepy. "Daddy?" she whispered. "Yes, my love. I'm glad you're not lost anymore." He felt a lump form in his throat. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Me too, sweetheart." "Me too." He walked out of her room and onto the large balcony. The city sparkled below him, the same kingdom of glass and steel he had once ruled. But it looked different to him now. It was just a city. His real kingdom was inside, sleeping in a bed painted blue. He thought about his wife. He knew she would be happy. She had never given up on him, even when he had given up on himself. Her love had been a bridge built with words on paper that had led him back to their daughter. The man who had everything now understood that he had once had nothing. And the man who had lost everything now felt like the richest person in the world. He had not found his daughter. In a way, she had found him. She had pulled him out of the cold, dark sea of his own making and brought him back to the warm, solid shore of love and family. He wasn't a tycoon anymore. He was just a dad, and for him, that was the greatest success story ever told.